In the decade after World War II, the Great American Road Trip was born, and it turned empty highways into a neon-lit wonderland. What follows is the complete untold story of how 1950s roadside America, from Route 66 to the new Interstate Highway system, changed the nation forever. To understand how it all happened, you have to start with the numbers. In 1950, there were 39 million cars registered in the United States. By 1960, that number had nearly doubled to 73 million. 3 out of 4 American families owned at least one car by the end of the decade, and around 7 million cars rolled off assembly lines in 1955 alone, starting at just $1,300, roughly 2/5 of the average American income. The automobile industry became the largest manufacturing segment in the country, and by 1960, 1 in every 6 working Americans owed their livelihood directly or indirectly to the car business. And these weren't modest little machines. Cars in the 1950s were big, bold, and heavy, loaded with chrome and built to move. The horsepower race had already kicked off, and the 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air became the era's defining symbol. Families were serenaded through television jingles to see the USA in their Chevrolet, while Ford countered with the sleek 2-seat Thunderbird. That's exactly what they did. Here's the thing most people forget. Air travel in the 1950s cost anywhere from 2 to 8 times what you'd pay today for the same ticket. Road trips weren't just popular, they were the only realistic option for most families. Soldiers had come home from the war, started families, and with a booming economy, paid time off, and a brand new car in the driveway, they had both the means and the motivation to get moving. The American Automobile Association, the AAA, saw its membership surge past 10 million during this decade as families relied on its maps, triptychs, and hotel ratings to plan their journeys. And the road they drove more than any other was Route 66. Established on November 11, 1926, Route 66 stretched 2,448 miles from Chicago, Illinois, all the way to Santa Monica, California, cutting diagonally through 8 states. A man named Cyrus Avery, sitting on the Federal Highway System Planning Committee, had pushed hard for a Chicago to Los Angeles route, arguing it would stimulate commerce and feed the growing automobile culture. He fought for that diagonal corridor connecting the Midwest to the Pacific, and today he's widely regarded as the father of Route 66. By 1938, Route 66 became the first U.S. highway to be fully paved, and between 1926 and 1985, an estimated 200 million vehicles drove its length. John Steinbeck had already immortalized the road in The Grapes of Wrath during the Dust Bowl era, when hundreds of thousands of desperate families loaded everything they owned onto rickety trucks and pointed west, following rumors of work in California. Steinbeck gave Route 66 its most enduring nickname, the Mother Road. In the 1950s, though, the Mother Road transformed from an escape route into a vacation destination, and the businesses that sprouted along its shoulders became the beating hearts of roadside America. Before you even reached the first town, the road itself was already selling you something. Burma Shave, the shaving cream company, had blanketed American highways with their famous sequential roadside signs. Small red placards placed 100 feet apart, each one delivering the next line of a rhyming jingle, so you had to keep driving to get the punchline. By the mid-1950s, there were roughly 7,000 sets of Burma Shave signs across the country, and they became so woven into the road trip experience that their eventual disappearance in the early 1960s genuinely felt like a loss. The motel industry exploded. The number of motels in the country tripled between 1940 and 1960, swelling from roughly 20,000 to over 60,000. These weren't the sterile chain hotels we know today. They were classic roadside motels, wild and wonderful, with kidney-shaped pools, themed rooms, and neon signs that beckoned weary travelers with glowing promises of air conditioning and television, luxuries that made children squeal with delight. Take the Wigwam Motels. In 1933, a man named Frank Redford got the idea for enormous teepee-shaped rooms from an ice cream stand he'd spotted in Long Beach, California. and he went on to build 7 motels using his wigwam design. The most famous, Wigwam Village No. 6, opened in 1950 right on Route 66 in Holbrook, Arizona, and became so iconic that Pixar featured it in the film Cars decades later. The way Redford licensed his design was genuinely clever. Chester Lewis purchased the rights through a novel royalty agreement where coin-operated radios were installed in every room, and every dime a guest inserted for 30 minutes of play went straight to Redford as payment. Then there was Kemmons Wilson. In 1952, Wilson opened the first Holiday Inn on Summer Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee, after a frustrating family road trip where motel quality turned out to be completely unpredictable. He told his mother he wanted to build hotels where rooms came in predictable sizes and children stayed for free. He borrowed $325,000 to make it happen, and the name itself was an accident. His business partner, Wallace Johnson, was sketching plans while watching the Bing Crosby film Holiday Inn and scribbled the name on the blueprints as a placeholder. Wilson liked it and kept it. By 1968, the 1000th Holiday Inn opened in San Antonio, Texas, and Wilson had standardized the hotel industry in a way no one had before. His main competitor in those early years was Howard Johnson's, whose restaurants and motor lodges were impossible to miss. The chain was expanding aggressively across the country and became just as recognizable as Holiday Inn, largely thanks to those distinctive orange roofs that announced their presence from a quarter-mile down the highway, and the roadside food options were multiplying just as fast. In 1955, a salesman named Ray Kroc opened his first McDonald's franchise in Des Plaines, Illinois, after being captivated by the efficiency of the original McDonald Brothers operation in San Bernardino. Kroc's vision of identical restaurants serving the same food at every location was, in its way, the same bet Kemmons Wilson had made with Holiday Inn, that American families on the move craved predictability. Meanwhile, a southern chain called Stuckey's was already a fixture on the roads below the Mason-Dixon line, its roadside billboards counting down the miles to the next pecan log roll and gift shop becoming as much a part of the southern road trip ritual as the highway itself. Meanwhile, a revolution in architecture was unfolding along those same highways. It was called Googie architecture, and it was unlike anything the world had seen. Upswept roofs, boomerang shapes, atomic bursts of neon, bold glass, steel, and colors that practically vibrated. Born from the optimism of the atomic age and the space age in Southern California, it spread across the country through coffee shops, gas stations, and motels. And perhaps nowhere more visibly than in the early McDonald's restaurants, whose golden arches and slanted rooflines were pure Googie. The style got its name from a single building. In 1949, architect John Lautner designed Googie's coffee shop on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, and 3 years later, architectural critic Douglas Haskell saw it, recognized something genuinely new was happening, and coined the term in a 1952 article for House and Home magazine. Architectural historian Alan Hess captured it perfectly when he said Googie made the future accessible to everyone, because it wasn't designed for custom houses or wealthy clients. It was built for coffee shops and gas stations. The style was so pervasive, so gloriously over the top, that when Hanna-Barbera created the Jetsons in 1962, they didn't exaggerate Googie. They copied it. And then there were the drive-ins. In 1933, a 33-year-old entrepreneur named Richard Hollingshead Jr. tested an idea in his own driveway, mounting a projector on the hood of his car and hanging a white sheet from the trees. He simulated rain with a lawn sprinkler and figured out that raising the front wheels of cars would give every windshield a clear sightline to the screen. By 1958, there were 4,063 drive-in theaters across America, roughly a quarter of all movie screens in the country. Parents brought kids in pajamas. Theaters offered bottle warmers, diaper vending machines, and even miniature golf courses. The greater privacy also earned drive-ins their famous reputation as passion pits, but that was just part of the charm. This golden age carried a shadow, though. The same roads that promised freedom to white middle-class families were far less welcoming to everyone else. African American, Hispanic, Native American, and Asian American travelers routinely faced businesses that refused them service and communities that made their presence after dark illegal, what historians now call Sundown Towns, of which there were thousands across the country. For Black travelers in particular, this reality produced one of the most essential documents of the era, the Negro Motorist Green Book, first published in 1936 by a Harlem postal worker named Victor Hugo Green. Updated annually and sold through Esso gas stations and travel agents, it listed the hotels, restaurants, and barbershops where Black travelers could expect safe, dignified service. By the 1950s, the Green Book had become, in the words of its own advertising, indispensable to every Negro highway traveler, a parallel road trip infrastructure built out of sheer necessity. And then came the change that reshaped everything. On June 29, 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, authorizing $25 billion to construct 41,000 miles of interstate highways, the largest public works project in American history. The federal government covered 90% of the cost. Eisenhower had drawn inspiration from the road system he observed in Germany during the war and remembered a military convoy in 1919 that took 2 months to cross the country. The new interstates would cut that same journey to 5 days. But the interstates bypassed the small towns and the motels, diners, and gas stations that had thrived on Route 66 watched their customers vanish onto faster roads. Neon signs went dark. Diners served fewer tables each month until closing became inevitable. In 1985, Route 66 was officially removed from the highway system. Today, fewer than 300 drive-ins remain, and the motel count has dropped from a peak of 61,000 to roughly 16,000. But something remarkable is underway. As Route 66 approaches its centennial in 2026, it's drawing more visitors than ever. Historic motels are being lovingly restored. Social media has breathed new life into vintage neon signs and quirky roadside attractions, and international travelers now regard the Mother Road as the quintessential American experience. The 1950s roadside America that once seemed headed for the dustbin of history is being rediscovered, preserved, and celebrated, a reminder that there was once a time when the journey itself was the destination.